Haidamai, welcome. You're listening to People, Planet, Food. Conversations about food, fibre and biomaterials that you could collectively refer to as the bioeconomy, that I hope are both a cause for optimism and a call to action. I'm Roger Robson-Williams, the Chief Sustainability Officer here at Plant and Food Research Group of the Bioeconomy Science Institute. I'm interested in understanding what a sustainable bioeconomy looks like. In this podcast series, I talk to a wide range of people who have something interesting to say about this. In this episode of People, Planet, Food, I'm really excited to be talking with Jay Crangle, who's the head of ESG, and Mike Burrell, who's the CEO of the Sustainable Business Council. Welcome, Mike and Jay.
Thanks, Roger. Great to be here.
So, Mike, what is the Sustainable Business Council and what does it do?
So the Sustainable Business Council celebrated its 25th anniversary last year. We were founded back in 1999 by a group of business leaders who were interested in driving sustainable action through business here in New Zealand. They went abroad, looked at other models overseas, and were very inspired by the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and took that model here to New Zealand. Fast forward 25 years, and we're now worth about 42% of New Zealand's private sector GDP. We're about 130 of New Zealand's leading sustainability companies, covering most of the major sectors, including the bioeconomy. And our work is really around helping our members deliver their sustainability action, but also mobilising them as a group to achieve more than they could achieve individually. Now, whether that's through advocacy or whether that's through collaborations and partnerships, that's really what we're about. And what we're really about is taking that long-term view of sustainability, saying that in the end, sustainability is shorthand for enduring and shorthand for taking a forward look, so looking beyond the horizon at opportunities and risks.
Yeah, and I often talk about kind of long-term prosperity rather than sustainability because of that. And I should just add that the Plant and Food Group of the Bioeconomy Science Institute has been a member of the Sustainable Business Council for 5 or 6 years now. But I'm really excited with the extra scale that we have as the Bioeconomy Science Institute. I'm really excited about the ways we might be able to kind of partner with SBC. So that's a little sidebar. But anyway, coming back to you, Mike, how did you land up being CEO of the SBC?
Circuitously. So my whole life and career really has been about sustainability in one way, shape or forms. Sustainable economic development or sustainability in its purest sense. I started off studying at Canterbury University here in Christchurch. I did a degree in public policy, political science and international relations, and my speciality was environmental policy and sustainability. And then I went on later and did a master's in a similar subject at the London School of Economics. And I've worked in government on those subjects, I've worked in the private sector, I've worked internationally and domestically, and that's been the common thread through all of this. You and I, in fact, worked when I was the CEO of Aquaculture New Zealand back in the day. We did a lot of work with plant and food back then. And what drew me to this was I was actually New Zealand's High Commissioner to South Africa at the time with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, living in Pretoria, looking for my next step. From there, I decided I wanted to go back into the private sector. I saw this role from there, applied for it, thinking that I didn't have a show, to be honest. I knew that there would be a lot of fantastic applicants for it, and I was very privileged to get it. So I started this role back in 2020, and it has not disappointed. It's a very exciting, dynamic role, amazing people that we work with, fantastic members, and we have impact, which is something that you can't always say in your job. So it's fantastic, and I'm very inspired by the people I work with.
On the subject of the people you work with, I've really enjoyed working with Jay on the ESG, Environment, Social and Governance Group of the SBC. And so, Jay, what's your story leading up to what you do today at the SBC?
I have enjoyed working with you too, Roger. So it's lovely to be in your offices today, and thank you for hosting us. Great question. It was kind of a happy accident. I had moved back to New Zealand after living in the UK for about 12 or 13 years. I was one of those many Kiwis that said they were going to stay for 2 years and then stayed for over a decade and met my other half there. And SBC was the first role that I applied for when I landed in New Zealand, and I remember doing a little happy dance when I got it. It was a really lovely combination of the things that matter to me. I've always been interested in sustainability in my personal life and taking climate action in the community, and this was a combination of doing that but bringing business into the fold, because I think business has such an opportunity to make a really big impact in this space. So it's a real pleasure to work with such a cross-section of organisations. I'm also really interested in partnership building. It's been a key thread throughout my career. I've worked in policy organisations, membership organisations, community, youth justice, Cancer Research UK, but the two things that have run through all those roles is a focus on building relationships with others, communicating complex things, and doing everything I do with a focus on impact and purpose. So as well as being a happy accident, it's a happy combination of all of those things.
Thanks both for kind of sharing something of your kind of history. I guess we've got to ask the question now, I mean, what is sustainability? We're talking about a sustainable bioeconomy. We kind of hinted at it in our conversation a moment ago about the kind of long-term prosperity angle, but who wants to have a pop-up? How do you define sustainability?
Will you mark us out of 10 at the end, Roger? That's what I'm slightly concerned about.
Absolutely.
You'll hold up a sign that says 10, hopefully. I think both of you have encapsulated it well. It's about long-term value creation, taking a long-term focus on your business and looking at how you're going to be resilient as an organisation. And it's about combining the 3 Ps, the people, the planet, the profit, in order to do that, and finding a balance between those 3 parts of the pie chart. Where I see businesses really excelling is when they go beyond just reducing harm and they focus on regenerating their community or the environment. That is the essence of sustainability for me. It's building back what we may have lost in community, people and planet to leave things in a better state than we found them. And one of the things that interests me about Sustainable Business Council is the fact that, as you said, as part of our ESG working group, we do cover the full suite of sustainability. We have a focus on environment, but we're also looking at the well-being of team members within businesses. We've got a focus on respecting biodiversity, focus on fair outcomes for people who work in the organisations. So SBC does the full suite of sustainability, and I think it's always worth remembering that it is a happy medium between those 3 things of people, planet and profit.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really helpful to be reminded that sustainability isn't just about environmental issues. Obviously, we are facing some real existential challenges in that space, but it's very much about people and about governance structures as well. And I really value a lot of the work that you do across all of those things. And I'm thinking at the moment, particularly the work that you're helping coordinate on human trafficking and how businesses respond to that particular threat. So thanks, Jay. I am holding up a card with a 10 on it.
Thanks, Roger. Your check is in the post.
I guess, you'd hope the head of ESG would have a pretty good answer to the question. But without wanting to descend into a slough of despond, I'm going to have to make a quick side trip to the planetary boundaries and just acknowledging that the planetary boundaries, this kind of globally recognised definition of the health of the planet, looking at 9 different life-supporting systems that people and our economies depend on. We're heading towards or have transgressed most of them. And Mike, I'm just interested in what you're seeing in terms of the business response to that kind of existential threat that we're destabilising our biosphere, which will have all sorts of knock-on effects in terms of how our economies operate.
And I think I'd start that by saying, Roger, that you've got to remember we're a piece of the pie here, using the pie analogy again, which is we're 130 companies. We are a big chunk, it's over 40% of GDP wrapped up in that group, but that's not all companies. Yeah, but certainly for our companies, I'd start by saying they're taking it very seriously. Leaders, CEOs, the C-suite, certainly sustainability leaders and professionals have realised for a long time, to use Catton and Dunlap's old term from the 1970s, that we are reaching ecological overshoot. That not only are we exceeding these planetary boundaries, but for some of them, the consequences will be decades, if not centuries, long in terms of their impact. That is, I think, well understood, certainly among our membership. The key now is not to be paralysed by that challenge, but instead to say, right, the only way that we're going to turn this around is to take concrete action, both at a systemic level, at a policy level, at an intergovernmental level, but also at a private enterprise level. You need to do all of those things, and at a community level and NGO level as well. You need all of those things working apart and together to actually have an impact. So if you look at what our businesses are trying to do, they're saying, well, how can we do the best for our business? So they're setting out a strategy to do that, looking at where they will have, they'll do a materiality assessment, of course, and say, well, where is it most material for us to take action? And they're working through that. And as SPC, we support them in that. We ask that they publish those reports annually, and we check up on them every couple of years to make sure that actually, A, they're doing it and following through, and also ensuring that they continue to be best in class, that they're the best at what they do. Some sectors, it's more challenging than others. So it's not about saying comparing across sectors, it's comparing within sectors. Are you best in class in what you're doing here? And so we do that in sort of 4 ways. One is by holding them to account. And we publish this every year and talk about what our members are doing. But the second is to celebrate what they're doing, because you talked about despondency. There is a real challenge here, which is that if you get the tone of this wrong, then it leads to nihilism. Why should we do anything? We throw up our hands and we walk away, And we're seeing some of that nihilistic behaviour internationally at the moment, And nihilism is the grandfather of fascism. That's where nihilism leads to, right? It leads to global warfare is where nihilism takes you. So what we're saying is this is the antidote to that. This is aligned to optimism. This is aligned to building things rather than destroying things. This is aligned to the future rather than the past. This is a civilizing project is what this is, This is about saying, actually, we can build a better world together. And the only way that we're going to do that is by acting the best that we can as individual companies and as individuals, but also working collectively where we can. Yeah. Now, that can sound rather idealistic, but if you look at what we have all done, particularly in Western democracies over the centuries, when we do that, we do better. We become wealthier, we become happier, we become healthier. And when we don't do that, then we go in the other direction. And at the moment, we're going a little bit in the other direction globally. So I think that this journey that we're on at the moment with sustainability is more important than ever. So bringing it back to our businesses, what does that look like? It means that they're delivering their own particular agendas, but they're also looking for areas of commonality. Where could we achieve more if we worked together? And a classic example of that would be in the bioeconomy space, which is AgriZero NZ. That was an example where we sat down and spoke to some of our members and said, is there anything more that we could be doing about methane? And they all said, yeah, there's a lot more we could be doing about methane. And so in a relatively safe space, because we didn't have a dog in this fight, we could say, well, what else could we be doing? And so that's where that journey began. And of course, now we've got AgriZero NZ, which is doing wonderful things. We've done similar things in transport. We've done similar things in energy over the years. And looking forward, we're looking to do similar things in nature as well. And so that's one space. And the other is the voice of these companies. Where you see positivity and you reflect that back into the membership, that gives people energy. It introduces this wonderful concept of hope, makes people realize it can be done. It's quite practical. We can do this thing. We can do it together. So bringing people together so that they've got hope, so that they've got others that they can work with and work their way through is really important. And also then reflecting that outwards through voice is really important. And that's where our voice as an organisation, our voice as a group of companies, both to government and to the public, is really important. And interestingly, over the next 6 months, you're going to hear that voice a lot more, because that other narrative around the opportunities that are presented to New Zealand is really important. So I'll just finish on one thing there, which is that we don't talk enough about opportunities. And for me, if I think about where a low carbon economy takes you, it takes you to a really exciting place. It takes you away from the 19th century and into the 21st century. It takes you into an area of rapid growth rather than slow growth, high income rather than low income, high skills rather than low skills. All of the things that New Zealand wants to be are exactly aligned with where you get to if you chase after what a modern economy looks like. And that's why we're saying there's complete alignment between sustainability and growth. They are not distant cousins. They are twins, intertwined together, working together. Yeah. And so that's what you're going to hear from us over the next few months, really, when we start talking about what the growth proposition of sustainability is.
You touched on a whole bunch of things that I'd really like to have more time to explore, but one in particular I want to pick up on is that balance between optimism about what is happening and what can happen without being kind of overly sort of Pollyanna-ish and ignoring the fact that, you know, we are really getting into quite an urgent predicament as a species. And I mean, that's something personally that I sort of struggle with. And so I'm interested in some of the signs in business that give you hope. And just before leaving both of you with that question, just a kind of further observation on that is that, you know, normalizing action on sustainability in business and in one's personal life is a really powerful tool, because we're social animals and we kind of see what other people are doing and we want to kind of to some extent conform with our tribe. So I think for me a really useful function that you serve as an organisation is saying, hey, this is just what competent leaders pay attention to. It's just part of the package, and that kind of normalization piece. And, you know, frankly, you're a bit odd if you're not all across this. And just, I will shut up in a minute, but a lovely example of this, I've just recently finished the Planetary Accounting Practitioner course, which is basically helping you to link those global Earth system science boundaries and the budgets we have for, you know, for carbon and the extent to which we need to reforest and so on at a global scale with the impact that your individual business or product is having. So I think it's a really powerful tool. I've just finished that course, but my point being that amongst that first cohort, there was a CEO of an organisation that doesn't have a specific responsibility for sustainability other than the fact that they're the CEO, and they took time out of their incredibly busy agenda to upskill themselves in that particular methodology, and that's the kind of thing that gives me hope. Anyway, people want to hear from you folks. Optimism, business, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of optimism. The first thing I'd say is that the fact that we have maintained and grown our membership of large-scale companies in New Zealand since 2020, so during a global pandemic and a massive downturn in economic activity, and we've grown by 30% over that time, and we've grown our revenue base by about 80%, signals to me that these companies are very serious about what they're doing. They're not leaving, they're staying in there, and we're growing. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is that more and more of our companies are putting sustainability at the heart of their strategy. They're not seeing it as a piece of marketing off to one side. They're seeing it in the same way that they view health and safety, which is that you wind it through your business. It needs to be at the board table. It needs to be at the executive suite. It needs to be wound through what you're doing. Why? Because it's really good as a risk barometer, but it's also really good for seeking opportunities. And companies that are doing that, and we've just spent some time here in Christchurch with a range of them over the last few days, see it as a growth tool. They see it as a way of driving value. So they don't see it as an off to the side. So that gives me some hope. Some specific things. If you look at some of the work that the agriculture sector's done over the last few years in terms of investing over $172 million with government in AgriZero, that's real money on real work to reduce methane faster than our targets. If you look at the AgriZero NZ targets, they're much more ambitious than the government targets are. And that's because they believe that through innovation, you can drive that methane down faster. If you look at what we've seen in the process heat area, with huge amounts of movement away from coal-fired generation through into other forms of low carbon, and that's happened really quickly. And this is large investments we're talking here, tens of millions of dollars in certain cases. That's really encouraging as well. Yeah. If we move sectors for a second and we start talking about transport, you know, we've seen a big uptick in New Zealand in investment into the EV sector, and we've still got a long way to go, but we actually have moved quite quickly. What that shows is get the incentives right. And by incentives, I don't mean money. I mean just the framework right, the policy framework right. And Kiwis will do the right thing. They'll move quickly towards that. We've seen the same thing happen in heavy freight as well. Huge interest in moving into alternative fuels there. Yep. And then if we move across to the circular economy, massive interest within our companies in doing the right thing in terms of reducing their environmental footprint by utilising systems that drive down resource use. Yeah. And then I suppose one of the most exciting things for me is the interest in the social sustainability side. You know, when we decided that we weren't going to lean into modern slavery and do something about that, the voice back from our members was, we want you to. This is really important that New Zealand gets with the global program, and we do not tolerate the abuse of children and of others in the manufacture of our goods and anything else that we might be importing or exporting for that matter. And so that was a real sign to me that we've matured as a set of companies, and we can see that sustainability goes beyond just the environment. It is, as Jay was saying earlier, about prosperity and people and planet as well. The other thing that gives me cause for hope is if I look globally, and I'll just give you two quick examples. The announcement by President Xi about a month ago that China is now moving to bringing in mandatory climate reporting for its companies on its stock exchange. That is a huge shift. That means now that fully half of New Zealand's export destinations, so all of Europe and China as well, are now demanding that of their companies. That tells you where the world is going, and in fact shows you that what's happening in the United States is out of kilter with where the rest of the world is going. This is massive for New Zealand. And if you look at our closest trading partner, Australia, you'll see that they're doing the same thing. Yeah. So that drive towards accountability and transparency is really important. Now, has that led to a whole lot of work for many of our members and quite a lot of investment to get their systems set up? Absolutely. Could we have done it more efficiently? No doubt. Should we have spent less money on this? Probably. But is it really important for long-term value? Absolutely critical. If you want to access these markets and these customers, then you better have your books in order and you better be able to show where your impacts are. Yeah? The other story I would tell is being at COP29, not the last one, the one before, and watching the money arrive. So watching the money people arrive, and you're thinking, why are all of these financiers here and these very, very wealthy individuals and banks here? I know why they're here, because they realise that there's going to be a lot of money in this transition. As we move away from one energy system and one way of being to another in terms of our economy, those shifts, that's where you want to put your money. The smart money is going to where the future is. I know, it's like, you wouldn't put your money into typewriters circa 1984, right? You'd be putting it into computers. Same deal here. You want to go where the puck is going, and the puck is going into the green economy. It's going into the renewable sector. That was a moment for me because I thought, well, the real money has turned up and is there. That hasn't changed. We're still talking at least $7 trillion over the next 2 years going into renewables, going into what we might call the clean economy. Yeah? And so to me, that's really positive. Now, is it fast enough? Not nearly fast enough. It needs to get faster. What we know is that economies go into a hockey stick, right? They can grow remarkably quickly. The faster we can grow into that clean economy, the better it is for the environment, the more we can reduce those 9 indicators. Yeah? And so I want to see this transformation across to the modern economy happen as fast as possible. And we're lucky China's moving there very quickly. And where they move, that's where Europe will move. And ultimately, North America will wake up and realise it has to move there as well.
All good. Just a little sidebar for me. I've got to say this. I think we also need to look to use less energy overall. I think that's one of the big challenges is our economy is so closely tethered to energy consumption, and we haven't managed to undo that tethering. But somehow we need to find a way of being with less energy into the future, I think, as well as a much, much greater proportion of that energy coming from renewable sources.
I 100% agree. I think that I didn't want to give the impression that, that we want to stay being a high energy society. I think it's incredibly wasteful, resource-wise, and it's hugely inefficient. So it's very costly. So absolutely we need to move towards sustainable energy, but it needs to be much, much more efficient. So much less energy for the lives that we lead. Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
Thanks. Jay.
Wow. I don't know if I have much to add. That was excellent, Mike. Very comprehensive. I suppose I have 2 reflections. One, I live and breathe the fact that it's difficult to have the both and, because you both have to hold the fact that life is challenging and sometimes it seems like not a lot of progress is being made, with the fact that there are glimmers of hope and inspiration, and you need to walk that fine line between those 2 spaces. And I think SBC does that well with the way in which we articulate the opportunities in the transition. The other thing I'd say, I don't know, are you a Star Wars fan, Roger? Have you watched Star Wars?
Oh, yeah, I was a massive fan when I was a kid.
Back in the day, nice. I'm watching Andor, which is one of the spin-off series. It's really good. at the risk of this sounding like a Disney Plus promotion, it is worth watching. And there's a scene in it where they talk about the pockets of action, they call it in the Rebellion, the pockets of action happening everywhere across the galaxy. And for me, there's a few parallels between that and the progress that we're making on sustainability. There are pockets, there's individuals, there are businesses, there are elements of society making real progress, and as a collective whole, that gives me hope, because I feel like those pockets, when we come together to collaborate, that really shifts the dial on sustainability. And I see that as has already been articulated in the finance space, and how investors are shifting towards more responsible investments. Where the money goes, the action flows, or something like that. Money flows, action, one of those two. I see it in the actions of individual businesses. I know one of our organisations who's on our board, Westpac, is one of the largest sustainability-linked bonds in Australasia with Auckland Council. We've got Mercury and Visy signing long-term power purchase agreements around renewable energy. There's lots of pockets of good work happening because it just makes good business sense. And the other thing that gives me hope and heart is the consistent push we see from consumers in this space, and the fact that they continue to prioritise environmental and social outcomes. We produce a report each year with Kantar called Better Futures, and that shows that consumers are holding the line on sustainability, and that combined with the progress that I see businesses making, the investment that's being made, that gives me hope, Roger. That and Star Wars always gives me hope.
Thanks. And your point about kind of pockets of activity, I mean, you're in a unique position in a way to see a lot of those. Not everybody gets that view. I mean, I think sometimes just as a citizen, you can be left with a sense that somehow this is your problem to fix. It's your carbon footprint, it's your soft plastics that you're trying to find somewhere to recycle or whatever. Whereas it's a collective problem, and sure, there are individual actions that we can and should all be taking, but there are some much bigger systemic issues that need to be resolved, and Mike was alluding to them. But I think your point about these pockets, I agree, I see that. I guess, and a build on that for me, and I'm interested in whether this resonates with you, is the sense that you can feel overwhelmed by the need to fix some of the big systemic problems, which frankly individuals and even an institution like the Sustainable Business Council can't do. But what we can do is do our bit to nudge some of the starting conditions. And I'm just wondering, Jay, if you got something more to say on that, because you're quite hands-on in the work that you do with the business community, and I mean you're literally facilitating kind of workshopping sessions around things. I just wonder if you could share a little bit more of some of the real hands-on things that you've been involved in that you're kind of excited about and maybe seeing bear fruit.
Great question, Roger. I think, yes, you're right. I think although it is the responsibility of society and systems to create the large-scale change we need, it's also important that people feel part of those societies and systems. So there's a bit of individual and a bit of large-scale system change for me. But in terms of pockets of activity at SBC, I don't know why this podcast is sponsored by the word pockets, but that's okay, I'll roll with it. As Mike alluded to, we are doing quite a lot of work in supporting businesses to measure, mitigate and prevent their risks in modern slavery. So understanding how, when you're at the bottom of the world and part of a very complex global supply chain, what can you do to influence your suppliers and make sure they're doing right by the people that they are working with. We do quite a lot of work in climate action space, and we run a lot of communities of practice which look at specific areas of climate and nature. So how can a business prepare for climate-related disclosures? How can they better understand their interdependencies with nature? And more in the social sustainability space, we have recognised that the profession itself is feeling pretty overwhelmed, which is some of the things that you alluded to, Roger, and that we need to have a robust, supported, resilient sustainability cohort to be able to undertaking this work. So SBC established itself as the business chapter for the Inner Development Goals movement, which is a global movement looking at how personal growth can lead to systemic change. We established ourselves as that in New Zealand exactly because we wanted to support businesses with the resilience piece and making sure that the profession is thriving. Because coming back to my point about it being individuals and business, if we don't have thriving individuals within companies, we're doing them a disservice and they're not able to continue to influence others and build this momentum. We need to be taking care of them as people as well. And so it's a real pleasure working at SBC because you do manage to peek behind the curtain of so many businesses and see so much fantastic activity going on, but you also manage to coalesce them around shared issues, whether that be social sustainability challenges or climate and nature.
So Jay, could you just add a bit about some of the resources, the kind of toolkit that you've put together for, I mean, not just SBC members actually, I think it's in the public domain, a lot of that information.
Yes, and shout out to you and other members of the ESG working group, Roger, for their engagement in this process. But we recognise there's a lot of businesses struggling with embedding sustainability across their organisations, and that challenge comes from a variety of levels. It can either be you're right at the beginning and you're wondering what carbon is, through to you're wanting to embed it in the inner workings of your executive and board. So we have co-created with a number of businesses, including the wonderful colleagues at ThinkStep, a series of tools which look at different aspects of sustainability. So, for instance, how you could go about a materiality assessment, how you think about your relationship with nature and measure that, how you can communicate transparently and openly about your sustainability efforts as a business. And that has been a real joy because we've been able to provide some resources that could help companies at any stage of their journey, and also provides them with examples of what not only what good could look like, but what great can look like, and how they go about that. So it's been a passion project of mine, Roger, and a delight to work with you all on it.
And look, as somebody working in a sustainability role in an organisation, it's just enormously useful to be able to dip into when you need a quick, I need to respond to somebody on this. Yes, of course. So I do very frequently visit that, genuinely. And I will say, other membership organisations in the sustainability space are available. SBC is a particularly good fit for us just because of scale. And actually, I will also just add, Mike, you alluded to this earlier, that you kind of hold your members accountable for progress on sustainability. And when we were looking as an organisation, Plant and Food was looking for an appropriate organisation to connect with in this space, that was a real strength. We really valued that to keep us honest. Anyway, I'm sure you've got something else you'd like to say on the...
Yeah, well, I suppose do take a look at our website and have a look at our new annual plan, because in there what we've done is we've set out some member stories so you can get an idea of the sort of things that our members are doing, but also there's a lot in there around the opportunities for involvement. So you'll see the kind of 8 key areas that we're focusing on through our 3 pillars, on the social sustainability side of things and the environmental sustainability side of things and governance. And we look at communities of practice, collaborations, education, events, research, sharing of information, all that really great stuff. And there's a lot of information there. But the thing I wanted to say was we're also the New Zealand representative for the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which gives us enormous advantage in the sense that we've got this 350, 400 person organisation producing this fantastic material, tools, training, online education, reports, all sorts of inspirational stories. And just recently, they've very kindly allowed for organisations like SBC, what we call Global Network Partners, to now access that information for our members. And what this means is that rather than having to pay the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars that you have to pay to belong to the World Business Council, you can belong to your local chapter and access about 80% of that information, which is very, very generous of the World Business Council to do that. We're now putting that information into our website so that it can go out to our members. Our members can see it. It's behind a firewall so that only members can see that. And we're also allowing them to go to an education academy where they can get global best practice that they can then apply to their own businesses for a discounted amount, which they can then use for anybody within their business. So they just pay one fee and they can use it for their whole business. This is us trying to, again, sort of provide more value back to SBC members so that they can accelerate their journeys. And in a way, I think of that as kind of our HQ. It's a little bit like, when I was a diplomat back in the day, we might have had very small posts out there in the world, but we had this great big head office that we could draw from to get amazing information and great insights. We do exactly the same thing with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. So that's really turbocharging things for us, which is really exciting. So we're sort of going into a new chapter now.
Yeah, that is a great new development, and I've been enjoying following how that's playing out in terms of what you've got to offer for people like me working in this space. I'm really interested in just changing tack slightly as we get toward the end of this recording, and asking each of you, if you had one thing you were going to ask of a board or CEO level in any business, what would that be? Maybe Mike, we'll start with you.
If I was going to ask something of a CEO, I would ask for them to look at sustainability through a business lens, to say, what can this do for me at a strategic level? Not around the keep cups, or even around making your, even engagement. Engagement's important, that's true. But if I want to turn the dial on my company, if I want to get higher growth, how can I use sustainability to drive that growth? And I think if they were to work with their sustainability leaders on that, as well as their C-suite, they would quickly realise that as soon as you start taking more like a 10 to 20-year time horizon, maybe even a 30-year time horizon, suddenly those risks become more apparent. But also it brings into sharp focus where the super trends are, where you need to be next, where those opportunities are. And that completely changes the conversation. It moves it from being, this is an annoyance that's kind of to one side, it's just a cost, to saying, this is critical, this is mission critical to what we're trying to achieve here, and this will drive our future growth. If I could just ask for that, see this as essentially a forward program of opportunity. If you start doing that, completely changes the way that you see sustainability.
Jay?
To build on that, I think as well as looking forward, there's also something about how you lead when you're an executive or board member, and how you show up for your business, and how you empower your teams to use sustainability as an opportunity to do things differently and to innovate. And that requires you as a leader to lead with courage and lead with transparency, and to lead in a way that, exactly as Mike said, focuses on what are the opportunities in this space? How can we differentiate our business? How can we do the right thing by people and planet, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it makes good business sense? And how do I curate a culture as a director and a leader that allows that to happen? So I think it's as much about forward looking in the what you do as it is about how you lead within your organisation.
Thank you very much. Both really thought-provoking answers, and I'll be reflecting a bit more on those. Thank you. To wrap things up, do both of you have a recommendation for a bookcast or a documentary or a podcast and a bookcast? What is that? I suppose it's an audio book. Anyway, you get the picture. Mike?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I actually would recommend a book, and I would take people all the way back to 1962, and I would really recommend Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. It's the most prescient book I've ever read, and I go back to it about every 10 years, and every time I go back to her book, I'm moved by it, I'm in awe of it, and I'm reminded that the fundamentals of what we're trying to achieve here have been in place for a long time. We're building on some very big shoulders here. But mostly what I'm inspired by it. I'm inspired by the fact that a scientist could look ahead and see what was to come and what was needed to overcome it. And I would really recommend people read that book. I think it's an overlooked book. I think it's a work of genius. And I think more people should know about Rachel Carson.
Agree completely. Jay?
Other than my behind the scenes on Star Wars podcast, which is probably less relevant for this conversation, Roger, I'm going to do a shameless plug and say the Sustainable Business Council produces its own podcast where we interview people who have been in the profession and done great things about their journey to get there and the gnarly challenges that they're tackling within their organisations. It is called SBC's Sustainability Superstars podcast, and we can't wait to have Roger on it for our next season. And it puts a little bit of the people behind the movement into place, and tells the stories of the humans that are leading some of the great changes that we're seeing in Aotearoa.
Great, thank you very much for that. And I would love to be a guest if you think I'm worthy of the
always, Roger, always.
And I would just say, of my 3 top books, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring is number 1, The Limits to Growth is number 2, yes, and Small is Beautiful by Ernst Schumacher is number 3. There are lots and lots of other amazing books, and all 3 of those beg the question, what have we been doing for the last 50 years, 60 years?
Yeah, we've been building the movement, I would argue. And interestingly, my dissertation was called Small is Useful. And we can have a conversation about that another time.
Over lunch, perhaps. Look, it's been wonderful having a chat, too short a chat, but a chat with you both this morning. Thanks ever so much for your time and your insights. Have you given me a cause for hope? Yes, you have. Partly, and I often say this to guests, but because you're energetic, dynamic people doing important work in a useful way. So thank you for that. And the insights that you shared around the glimmers of hope, the bright spots that you're seeing, very much so. Have you issued a kind of call to action? Well, any businesses that might be listening to this surely are going to be at least checking out your website. And a bunch of people are going to be looking at Star Wars movies now, and other people will hopefully be getting Silent Spring and having a read of that. Mind you, you need to be sitting down and have a cup of tea with you for that, because it's a difficult read. It's a difficult read, but definitely worth doing.
I'd be going with an Irish whiskey myself, yeah.
Well, I didn't want to, all sorts of beverages are available. And look, to all of you out there that have been listening to this podcast, I very much hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. If you're interested in more of these sorts of conversations, then please subscribe to Sigest and rate and review the show. That's really useful. And I guess more important than that, share it with other people that you know who you think might be interested. But most importantly of all, if you know of somebody that you think I should have a conversation with on these broad topics of food, fibre, biomaterials and the bioeconomy, please do get in touch on sigest@plantandfood.co.nz. That has happened, and it has actually led to a whole research project in its own right, so please do get in touch. Thank you very much for listening. I'm looking forward to the next podcast. I'm going to keep it under my hat who the guest is going to be. You'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, until then, Mā te wā. See you next time.